Put your seatbelts on and get ready for the ride. We're the freaking New York Jets, so we're built for this shit.
Hello, welcome to another episode of In the Trenches with Gang Green. I'm your host, Bubbs. It's game week. We finally made it. Preseason training camp. It's in the rearview mirror. The New York Jets get set to take on the Pittsburgh Steelers to open up their 2025 season at home at MetLife Stadium. And today, to give us the Steelers angle of this week one matchup, we're joined by Steelers beat reporter Nick Farabaugh. Nick, thanks so much for coming on. How's it going, man?
Yeah, thanks for having me on. I appreciate it, man. It's been going well. Excited for football to be back finally.
Yeah, it's been quite the off season for both of these teams. Of course, Jets, Steelers swapping quarterbacks, Jets getting a new head coach, Rodgers signing on with Pittsburgh. So this one certainly doesn't lack any storylines. We'll get into those storylines. We'll get into the quarterbacks and Fields and Rodgers and Glenn and all that stuff. But I just wanted to start. What are your overall thoughts on Pittsburgh? Where is the fan base, the team at right now with this team heading into the 2025 season? And then also just from an outside perspective, your thoughts on where the Jets stand going into year number one with Aaron Glenn.
Yeah, for the Steelers, I mean, it's a big year for them. I feel like this is a big transition year for them, but also a year to build for the future. While they went in on a lot of big names, you know, guys like Jonnu Smith, Jalen Ramsey, Darius Slay, obviously Rodgers in that conversation as well, and they want to win a playoff game. I really think this year kind of has to have some inkling of postseason success for them to be a successful year for them. But I do think it's also kind of the apex for Omar Khan's tenure here, starting as GM. He's entering now year three for him. And some of his young guys, you know, are kind of coming into their own now. So we're going to see kind of how all the young players progress really on the offensive line, the defensive line, guys like Joey Porter Jr. in the secondary. It's going to be an important season for all those guys. So really, I think that's where the Steelers are. They're kind of at a crossroads where this is kind of almost the last gambit of this generation, and then you kind of turn a new page over next year, probably, you know, go for the quarterback and do different things. So the Steelers are kind of trying to win while retooling, I think. So it's an interesting area, but that has obviously given a lot of frustration to Steelers fans because they haven't won a playoff game since 2017. It's a long time for the Steelers, to say the least. And for the Jets, you know, I think this year is just about establishing a culture, establishing a standard with Glenn, kind of figuring out who's part of your future, right? You have foundational pieces and guys like Garrett Wilson and Sauce Gardner, but can Justin Fields be the quarterback of the future? Can he have a Baker Mayfield, Geno Smith-like resurgence? Or, you know, they have to go into the quarterback market next year and look for somebody? I think that's going to be the big question, honestly. But, you know, they even have other guys, you know, young guys that they want to figure out who are these guys. You know, is Fashanu and Membu the tackle duo of the future? Is Breece Hall really the running back of the future, or is he someone you move off of? So there's different questions there, but they are in a different stage of this than the Steelers are, I think. But they're kind of in a similar spot too, because it feels like if things go off the rails really quickly, they'll be in the quarterback market just like the Steelers will be.
Yeah, definitely. It's one of those things where Fields doesn't work out. You're looking at obviously quarterbacks 2026 class and moving forward there. And it's totally different with the Jets these last 2 years with Rodgers. It's been all in. It's been all about Super Bowl playoffs. Now the expectations are a lot different going into this year than they've been previously. The quarterbacks, that's one of the biggest storylines. I'll start with Rodgers, then I do want to get into Fields and what you saw from him last year, of course, with his time in Pittsburgh, the 6 starts. But just Rodgers, since he signed on, you know, late in the offseason, had, of course, the entire training camp. What have you seen from him? How has he been in the locker room, the fan base? Just what has been the Rodgers experience so far with week one a couple days away?
Yeah, I mean, the locker room loves him. They like his quick-witted humor. They really like the kind of pedigree he's brought. There's kind of no nonsense pedigree he's brought. He's kind of a very polar opposite of what Russell Wilson was last year. And I do think that pendulum swinging that far has kind of given a breath of fresh air to this locker room. Russ is always positive, rah. That's not Rodgers at all. Rodgers is down to business, do the details, do it my way. I'm going to tell you how to do it, and I'm going to pour into you. I believe in you, but it's kind of tough love, and I think that has worked. Obviously, they haven't gotten into the rocky part yet, so no one's been thrown under the bus and anything. There hasn't been any tension between him and Arthur Smith. Could that occur at some point? Sure, but so far that's looked fine. In terms of his performance on the field, I mean, it's been pretty standard for what you saw down the stretch last year. The arm is still solid. He has some accuracy misses down the field nowadays in his career. Um, he can move a little bit more, I think, than he could last year. He's not going to scramble like he was in his prime, but you can send him on rollouts, you can send him on bootlegs. If you need like 3 yards and there's man to man and there's a hole that opens up, he can probably scramble and get you 5 or 6 and get you the first down. Like, he's functionally more mobile than he was a little bit, but still not going to be his forte. So I do think there's some limitations there, but he's obviously one of the best field generals to ever play the game of football. His pre-snap work is still wizard-like. So he's a guy that I think has been fine for them. But how does it manifest, I think, is going to be the real question. We haven't seen him play in the preseason. He didn't play. So how's the vision of him and Arthur Smith kind of coming together fit into things, because they are very different offenses. Arthur Smith and what he wants, and what Aaron Rodgers wants, which is that gun stuff, the empty stuff. It's a little different than what Arthur Smith wants. We don't know necessarily what's going to look like, but so far so good with Rodgers. The on the field stuff I think has been as advertised. You knew you weren't getting the 4-time MVP version. It looks like you're getting, somewhere in the realm of the 16th best quarterback in the NFL, something like that.
Yeah. I guess just what would be what's your gut telling you in terms of expectations, like statistical wise? You kind of just mentioned it there with, the 16th best quarterback. Do you feel he is, what he did last year, the 28 touchdowns? Do you feel he's lower, higher in this offense? Like, I guess just statistically, where do you feel he does end up? Not only game number 1, but just the entire body of work here in 2025.
So my guess is he ends up a little lower than that in terms of touchdowns, but I think he'll be lower in interceptions too. He's not going to have 11 picks. Russ last year had almost 2,500 yards. I can see if Rodgers plays 17, I think he gets north of 3,000, probably somewhere around 330, something like that. Something about 25 touchdowns and like 5 picks sounds about right to me. I don't think they're going to light the stat sheet up through the air. They just don't really have the weapons to do it. I don't think. I think that's a big thing. DK is a mercurial number 1 wide receiver. I think that pairing's a little odd given how hyper detail focused Rodgers is, but they made the Metcalf move, I think, as a future move as much as a now move, because he's only 27. So, that's something to keep in mind. They have tight ends, Freiermuth, Washington, Jonnu. It's a good trio of tight ends, but their other receivers are kind of wide receiver 3-4 types. They're kind of small, deep threats. It's kind of be interesting there. They do have a really good pass catching back in Jaylen Warren. So we'll kind of see where everything goes there, but I'm not expecting them to light it up on the stat sheet, and they're going to be very ground pound focused too. That's always been something Arthur Smith is focused on. You run the ball a ton, get wide zone, mid zone, stuff like that. So I think that's fair for a statistical kind of area for Rodgers. I don't think they're going to throw the ball at will. I think they're going to run the ball a lot, and I think that's kind of the expectation he came in coming into this too.
Yeah, now moving on to Justin Fields, you mentioned Russ as well. Funny, 2 Pittsburgh quarterbacks go to New York. Rodgers goes from New York to Pittsburgh. What did you see from Fields last year in the 6 games, just covering him? We all kind of have a pretty good grasp of what he's done so far in his 4 years. He's on his 3rd team now in his 5th season. A couple different offense coordinators, a couple different schemes, the running ability. We all know that's there. The next biggest question is the passing ability. And from a Jets perspective, it's what can this passing offense be? What are your thoughts on what you saw from Fields last year in the 6 starts before Russ took over, and just how he projects moving forward here in 2025?
He's fascinating in a lot of ways. He's got all the physical talent in the world, and he is very dynamic with the ball in his hands. There's no question. Hard to bring down. But he doesn't deal with pressure super well. Sometimes he can just create things because he's so dynamic and hard to bring down. He doesn't he runs into pressure sometimes. He creates it. He's got a great arm. I do think one thing that improved last year, 2 things that improved exponentially last year were ball security, And then the deep accuracy. I thought those two things improved. But the intermediate to short, he has like some random misses from time to time where you're just like, what happened there? It's a mechanics thing. The post snap processing can be a little bit of an adventure. Pre snap, I think he's actually pretty good. But sometimes when the picture changes, teams can get him there. So he's a pretty volatile quarterback. There's times where he has really good games and can put the team on his back, and you believe he's the guy. And then there are other times where the offense is just going to stall out. And I do think in the low red zone, that's a really big thing for him. When he gets into the red zone, he's able to create with his legs. And I do think that brings efficiency up. So even if you only have 3 red zone trips, more often than not with the Justin Fields led offense, you're going to get into the end zone. That's what really kind of came about with the Steelers last year, is they would stall out a lot in the red zone and then would get the 3rd or 4th down, and Fields would just take it with his legs and get it in. I mean, he had 5 rushing touchdowns in 6 games last year. He also fumbled a lot. Like there was some weird, like when he went under center quarterback exchange stuff, where he would just fumble the snap a lot, and it wasn't on the center; it was kind of on him, and that was something. So he's a really like volatile type of player. He's not as turnover prone as he was when he was in Chicago, where he was just kind of a walking turnover while also being a walking highlight. So it's a little bit more kind of up and down with him. He's gonna win you a game or two. There are gonna be games. Like I remember although they didn't win it last year, he nearly clawed the Steelers back into that Colts game. And that was just a fantastic performance. But then there's other games like the Cowboys game last year where he almost threw 2 or 3 picks, and it was just like, what is he doing? And so there's some up and downs with him, and it's going to be a roller coaster ride. But if you get him on the right day, Justin Fields can carry your team. But if you get him on the wrong day, it can also go off the cliff. So he's a pretty volatile player.
Yeah, it's finding that consistency, not only with the legs, but of course through the air as well, is hopefully what this Jets team gets. Tanner Engstrand, this offensive staff gets out of him, where he can, in a perfect world, take that Baker Mayfield, Sam Darnold like jump with a different team, new scenery. And you mentioned some of the pre-snap stuff, but once the ball is snapped, reading the coverage and things like that, I recognize that just going to the practices. Pre-snap, I thought a couple plays where he picked up blitz as well, but once the ball is snapped, there is sometimes Reed's not there. He does tend to panic and hold on to the football a little bit too long, and that is a result in some of those a high number of sacks that he's taken, like you mentioned. So it'll be interesting. I'm excited for the Fields. I'm very kind of tempering my expectations. I know what he could do with his legs, but the next steps with his arm. And moving on now to the rest of the offense and a little bit into the defense. You mentioned some of the Steelers playmakers. Jaylen Warren got the new contract. So I wanted you to just tell me about with that contract extension. Caleb Johnson as well. They, of course, selected out of Iowa. The running back room, what they bring to the table against the Jets defense that hopefully sees improvement against the run this year. They brought in Juwan Briggs, brought in Harrison Phillips last week via trade, 2 guys that hopefully could stop the run at a much higher level than what this defense has done in previous years. That's been a struggle. What are your thoughts on Jaylen Warren in that running back room?
Yeah, I mean, Warren and Caleb Johnson are very different, and really it's a 3-headed backfield because Kenneth Gainwell is also going to play. And the Steelers have done this offseason some 22 personnel stuff where they brought 2 guys on the field. Gainwell's been used as a split out receiver a lot, as much as he has kind of been utilized as well in that shotgun sets, kind of in the empty stuff. They love to use him there. But Warren is the pass pro kind of passing game guy. That's not really Caleb Johnson's game. He was not asked to do that at Iowa, as you can imagine. The early down work with Johnson kind of goes into the zone stuff. They needed a pure zone runner, and Najee Harris was a gap runner, and Arthur Smith just wants to run a bunch of wide zone, mid zone, inside zone, split zone. He's run that since his days at Tennessee with Derrick Henry, and that's what he wants to run. And Caleb Johnson is a very natural zone runner. And the thing with Caleb Johnson is, he's not going to be somebody that is like Jahmyr Gibbs, where he's just instantly flying down the field. He's the fastest guy on the field. But if you give him a cutback lane and you don't stay and you don't stay with your gap integrity up front on zone runs, he will cut back and hit the home run on you. If you let him get in the open field, he can fly. He's been timed during training camp, as being as fast as DK Metcalf. So he can really fly. So the home run hitter ability he brings to the table, if you let him get in the open field, is something to really keep an eye on early downs. In terms of Jaylen Warren, he's also just a powerful, compact runner. He's kind of built like the old, you think about Doug Martin, Maurice Jones-Drew, Michael Turner types, Michael Turner's a little bit taller than those other two, but he's just kind of a block of muscle. He's hard to bring down. He's got great contact balance. That's something to always keep an eye on. The Steelers will throw screens, swings, get the ball to him in the flat, and just let him work. He's tough. Corners, safeties have a hard time bringing him down. He's fearless, and so he'll stick his face in the fan in pass pro and take on your defensive tackle, your edge rusher right in the A gap. That's what he does. And so it's a running back room that is very different from one another. They're all separate. They all bring different things, but all three of them will play, and they will be like significant outlets for Aaron Rodgers throughout the game.
You know, I want to move on to the receiver room. You mentioned a little bit about DK Metcalf and that move, of course. We also talked about some of the question marks, and that's kind of the similar boat that the New York Jets are in. You have Garrett Wilson, but outside of that, there are a ton of questions with the receivers behind him. Feels like the same thing with the Pittsburgh Steelers. Has anybody really merged Calvin Austin and Roman Wilson, even a Scotty Miller? I know you mentioned the tight ends, Pat Freiermuth, of course, they acquired Jonnu Smith in that trade. Anybody that's really emerged during camp behind DK, just from a pass catching perspective, tight end, receiver, and how that room projects this season?
Well, yeah, well, I mean, I think Jonnu and Pat are going to get significant work. They're going to play a lot of 12, 13 personnel. I mean, they've even played 04 and 14 personnel where they have 4 tight ends on the field. That has been something they have done. So those guys are going to be significant. They've thrown screens to Jonnu, and he's a yak producer for them. So those guys will have high floors and get significant work. But in the receiver room, Calvin Austin's been banged up. He's just kind of now getting back into the swing of things. He will play, obviously. He's kind of your high floor deep threat. He's kind of like, Tutu Atwell in LA, kind of how they use him. He'll be a slot receiver that you have to keep a cap on. So if the safeties do fall asleep, I mean, Calvin Austin can make you pay. He's a good route runner out of the slot. But the guy that's really, there are 2 guys that have kind of, I guess, risen up, and that's been Roman Wilson and Darnell Washington. And Darnell Washington has quickly become Rodgers' guy, essentially, on this team in the red zone. He throws to him a lot in the red zone. So Darnell seems like a guy that finally is a pass catcher. He's a big blocker, and he's like 6'7", 300 pounds, but he's kind of come along as a pass catcher this year. So I'm interested to see if that translates now into games. He got a touchdown in their first preseason game. Arthur Smith has talked about that being something they really want to do, is starting to get Darnell Washington utilized. So he's somebody. Then Roman Wilson, he has a very niche role, but he is a guy that in 12 personnel is their second wide receiver, and he's like an explosive lightning bolt off the line of scrimmage. If you do not get your hands on him, he will beat you across the field on crossers and just go for explosive gains. And I think that's the kind of thing. He's going to have a very high yards per catch this year. And if you can get your hands on him, he has a trouble defeating press. Like, that's the big thing. But if you don't get your hands on him and he beats you on those crossers, I mean, in the preseason, he beat guys like Tyson Campbell and Jamel Dean, who are legitimately starting corners for both their teams, just because he ran right by them. And even if you get hands on him at the top of his route, he's able to kind of shimmy off you once he's off the line of scrimmage. And so that's something to keep an eye on. If the Steelers can hit a few big plays on some of these crossers, and they hit a few of them to him in the preseason, that can be something. Scotty Miller's had a great camp, but I'm not really sure how much he's going to play. But I still think, these wide receivers have like significant limitations in some respects outside of DK. I mean, Calvin Austin is the one guy that has a proven track record of kind of being someone that you can rely on, but he's kind of a wide receiver 3-4, and that's kind of what they are. There's no one that like is a wide receiver 2 that can take advantage of the attention DK gets, and I think that's something to think about. So while I say that these guys can be dangerous in certain aspects, and you don't want to sleep on them, they're like rosterable, good wide receiver 3-4 types. They are also not wide receiver 2 types that you have to be fearful of.
Yeah, very similar with the way the Jets are constructed behind Garrett going into the season. One more on the offensive side before we move to the defense. Broderick Jones is a very interesting player. Started out a right tackle, had some ups and downs, now shifts on over to the left side, protecting Rodgers' blind side. What are your thoughts on him entering another season? Obviously, 2023 pick, moving on over to the left side. Has there been growth there moving to the left side? Just what do you feel about him going into this season?
Yeah, I mean, last year's tape at right tackle was like unplayable.
Mhm.
And then he goes over to the left side to start this summer, and he struggled early, but then the pads came on, and it started to look like, okay, this guy should have been over there the entire time.
Yeah.
He's definitely not perfect, and there's still
Mhm.
things to work on. He drops his head. He can get beat by power sometimes. The hands get wide at times, so he's a little prone to holding calls every now and then. But last year, he wouldn't even get to play right half the time. And so this year, he's been down into the playbook. The footwork has been the biggest thing. He's like really, his feet just look way better now. And so he gets to his spot. He's harder to move. He's a real plus in the run game. That's been something that's really kind of flashed. They send him on as a puller, they send him in space. He's super athletic and he's big and strong and he moves guys out of gaps. So if you're not ready to kind of stick on the edge there, he will move you and create those lanes for guys like Caleb Johnson. And so, yeah, there's been some growth for him this year. He's clearly way more comfortable naturally on the left side. I've talked with members of the Steelers org, and they've been telling me we screwed up so bad playing him at right
Mhm.
tackle the first 2 years. He is so obviously a left tackle. He's improved his football IQ leaps and bounds. He picks up stunts, recognizes fronts now, can pick up blitzes. You're not really going to fool him that way anymore. He certainly is not good. However, he is on the right steps to being that. Maybe he's probably still a year away from like putting it together if he does put it together. But last year you watched the tape and he was a disaster. At this year, I think if he's just average, that's a win for the Steelers. But there will be opportunities for guys like Will McDonald, for example, to get him.
Yeah. Yeah, that's one of the big matchups to watch. I was going to bring up was Will McDonald against Broderick Jones. In week number 1, the very close draft picks, of course, going back to that 2023 draft. Moving on now to the defensive side of the football. Once again, we're talking to Steelers beat reporter Nick Farabaugh. TJ Watt, of course, the big extension this offseason. One guy, though, that has popped up now in some of the contract talks is Cam Hayward. What's the latest with him and just that defensive line room as a whole? Of course, TJ Watt with the historic contract before training camp.
Yeah, so far with Cam, not a lot of movement there. I mean, they could do it before this week 1 game. The Steelers have a strict policy. They do not negotiate contracts during the season. So they have a deadline set for that Sunday. Cam got his deal last year, the Thursday before they went to Atlanta. So it's not like unheard of for them to do it that late. Fryermuth signed it the Saturday before they went to Atlanta. Like this happens a lot. So it's possible Cam gets his deal sooner rather than later, but they haven't really talked to him that much. And it doesn't seem like Cam has kind of minded as much. He did make a very public, maybe I'll sit out, but the last 2 weeks he's been out there practicing full in individual and team. It seems like he's kind of set in that he's going to play regardless. So he's in game shape. And he's kind of looking fine now. Overall, this defense, though, I think the big thing has been kind of how do they gel together? Super talented unit, just at all 3 levels. And, you look at TJ Watt now, kind of with his extension. You have Alex Highsmith across from him. You have Cam Hayward and Keanu Benton on the inside. They do have Derek Harmon, but he's not going to play in this game probably with that knee injury he suffered in the final preseason game. But you go to the second level, you have Patrick Queen, you have Peyton Wilson, who had a really good rookie year, and they're talking him up like he's going to be, a breakout star there. You have safety, which I think is probably the most vulnerable spot on this team. Sean Elliott's good, and he was really good, and he got an extension. But free safety, Juan Thornhill, we'll see. And then the corners are a little bit older, but still really good outside of JPJ, who is young and has kind of rounded into himself. So really talented unit, but fully expect this unit to be kind of at full strength minus Derek Harmon.
Yeah, I guess I just wanted to touch on the cornerback room before we close things out here. You mentioned, right, a little bit older, Darius Slay, 34, Ramsey, 30, but then you have Joey Porter Jr., just, 25, I think, entering year number 3. So much more the younger piece there. What are your expectations for Ramsey coming over in that big trade, right? Mika going back to Miami, the Jonnu acquiring as well, and then Darius Slay, just your expectations for that group with the older guys and then, the younger piece in Porter Jr.
Yeah, I mean, it's big expectations. Now they're using Jalen Ramsey like a chess piece. He's been a nickel, he's been a safety, and he's been an outside corner. It just kind of depends where they want him every week. So this week, is he going to shadow Garrett Wilson? I don't know.
Mhm.
or is he going to be a slot? Is he going to be a slot corner that they're more focused on the run game to contain Fields? I mean, they can do a lot of different things. So what they've been doing is in their base 3-4, he's been the free safety. They've been taking Thornhill off the field and keeping him there. And then when they go to nickel, he's been the nickel generally. But he also has shadowed guys before in camp. There's been days where he just shadows Metcalf, or, in for example, when the Buccaneers came for the joint practice, he just followed Mike Evans around.
Yeah.
Like that's what they did. So there's different ways they can do it. This is not a fast secondary. I think that's one thing to think about when you try to attack this defense is, can we get the secondary, the perimeter in space, and try and just beat them with speed? The good thing for the Steelers is Porter, Slay, and Ramsey, all really good tacklers. So if you try to attack the perimeter because you think they can't tackle, you're probably going to be sorely mistaken. But if you can beat them to the perimeter, I think about things like drag routes, crossers, just trying to kind of horizontally stretch them and defeat them with speed could be something. Like, for example, the Jets, Arian Smith. Like, that's somebody I think about, right? Even though he has question marks, obviously can fly. Can you kind of beat them on a jet sweep maybe and try and get them out there? That's something to think about. So I do think that's the one concern I have. But Slay's looked really good. They're not really forcing him to be in man-to-man a ton, or if he is, he's an off man, and they give him some safety help. He still is very instinctual at the catch point, still very good in zone coverage. Ramsey's not the elite athlete he once was, but is still very good. Porter is kind of the big question. It's like, is he just a corner too, or is he a future star? The big thing with him has always been just the penalties, man. I mean, he got called for so many penalties last year. There were matchups when he would shut down guys, and you looked like you have your future corner one. And then there's other ones, like against T. Higgins, he got called for 7 penalties in one game against T. Higgins. I mean, and so that's the thing. Guys like Garrett Wilson aren't the archetype of guys that give him trouble. It's bigger bodied guys like T. Higgins. DK gave him trouble when they faced off. Those types of guys. Cortland Sutton gave him trouble last year. So it's those types of guys, but it seems like he's kind of found a little more consistency in his game and just trust in his technique, which has been the big reason why he holds a lot. So lots of expectations for the secondary. The one concern I have, they're a little slow. So I think there's ways to exploit them through using speed, but you got to scheme it up because they're very smart and there's not going to be a lot of coverage for us.
Yeah, both these cornerback rooms, Jets and Steelers, are two of the stronger groups for these teams, both offensively and defensively. It's something to watch on Sunday. So to close things out, appreciate you coming on. This was a lot of fun, giving you all the Steelers insight. Where can everybody find you, all your work covering Pittsburgh and all the good stuff headed into this game on Sunday?
You can find me on Twitter at FarabaughtFB, Blue Sky Nick Farabaugh. You can read my stuff, PennLive.com/Steelers, and then I have a YouTube channel as well, the Steelers Blitz on PennLive.
Awesome. We'll put the link in the YouTube, or put the YouTube link in the description down below so you can check them out. Appreciate you coming on. Again, we'll have a lot more content coming away the rest of the week heading into this one, and appreciate you all. Until next time, thank you for watching.